The Supreme Court closes in on what could be a monumental ruling to protect women's sports. The State Department announces a freeze on visa processing for 75 countries to reduce the burden on American taxpayers. Iranians call out the left's hypocrisy amid the Iranian government's persecution of protesters. And a World War II Air Force veteran receives an amazing gift on his 101st birthday. We'll get into all of that in your quick hits now. What's up, guys? Welcome to the wrap-up, where we break down the biggest stories of the week that you might have missed but need to know. I'm your host, Erin. On Tuesday, the Supreme Court seemed ready to grant states a significant win in the ongoing debate over women's sports, with most justices showing little enthusiasm for altering biological facts to satisfy current political pressures. Fox News reported that the Idaho dispute centers on the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, passed in 2020 to ensure women's teams remain reserved for biological females. The law was challenged by transgender-identifying athlete Lindsay Hickox, who sought to join Boise State University's women's cross-country team. Idaho asked the court to determine whether sex-based athletic classifications violate the Equal Protection Clause. Although Hickox later attempted to walk away from the case, claiming he no longer wished to compete and wanted to avoid the spotlight of a Supreme Court showdown, the justices declined to dismiss it. During oral arguments on Tuesday, Justice Samuel Alito focused on what many see as the main flaw in the challenger's case: their failure to clearly define sex. He questioned Hickox's lawyer about how courts could assess claims of sex discrimination if there's no clear constitutional definition of sex. Asking her for a definition, Hickox's lawyer responded saying, quote, "We do not have a definition for the court." On the steps of the Supreme Court, the America First Policy Center hosted a Save Women's Sports rally. In attendance was Chloe Cole, detransitioner and friend of PragerU, who had this to say about the dangers of the transgender agenda.
Nothing about this is compassionate or loving. It is destructive not just to the individual, but to everybody around them.
The Supreme Court is expected to issue rulings by summer, and if Tuesday's arguments are any indication, the justices may rule to restore states' authority to protect female competition. Up next, the U.S. State Department has announced a major shift in immigration policy. The Biden-era approach to liberal immigration is being replaced by stricter enforcement, designed to protect American taxpayers and ensure newcomers do not become burdens on public resources. The Daily Wire reported that the State Department will freeze immigrant visa processing for citizens of 75 countries beginning January 21st, a sweeping measure that pauses green card and permanent resident visa processing for nearly 4 in 10 nations worldwide. The State Department said in a press release that the freeze targets countries whose nationals have historically relied on U.S. welfare programs at unacceptable rates. This action does not affect non-immigrant visas such as tourist, business, student, or temporary work visas. Among the countries specifically cited are Somalia, Haiti, and Iran, along with many others across Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and Latin America. Many argue this is a necessary correction to decades-old policies that welcomed immigrants without adequate vetting of their economic impact. The administration says the visa freeze will remain in place until it can better ensure that new arrivals are financially independent and not a drain on American taxpayers. In our next story, Iranians are calling out the Western political left for its silence as their own government brutally cracks down on nationwide protests, leaving thousands dead. According to the prominent Iranian dissidents, the left in America and Europe has largely ignored the suffering of Iranians at the hands of the Islamist regime. Iranian activist Masih Alinejad stated, quote, "I have to say, the silence is not accidental," arguing that leftist acknowledgement of Iran's repression would expose inconsistency in their own ideology. The Islamist regime's response to the protests have included internet blackouts, over 10,000 arrests, and mass killings of protesters who took to the streets demanding freedom and change. Following the reports of the Iranian government's actions, President Donald Trump canceled all talks with Iranian officials and stated, quote, "Help is on its way." Last year, the exiled Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, sat down with PragerU CEO Marissa Streit and outlined the fundamental problem with many liberals' approach to the conflict.
There's a great deal of naivete in understanding that the DNA of this regime is one that it cannot be compatible and coexisting in the world as we know it. Because in their view, it's either you or them. There's no gray area.
You can watch the full episode of Real Talk with Marissa at PragerU.com. And for our next story, we have some good news out of Texas, where an Army veteran who served as an aviator during World War II received an incredible gift from his family on his 101st birthday. B.L. Craighead Jr. took flight in an open cockpit Stearman biplane, the same model he flew during World War II. The nonprofit Dream Flights provides free flights to senior veterans and has honored approximately 8,000 U.S. veterans who fought in Vietnam, Korea, and World War II. In 1941, when Craighead was just 17, he joined the Army Air Forces, training at Shepherd Field, and later became an instructor. Upon returning to the runway, Craighead was surrounded by over 40 members of his family and friends who lined the runway and saluted him as he taxied past. His granddaughter Julie said, quote, "He had both of his hands up in the air. I've never seen him like that in my life." And now it's time for Quick Hits. The poster child for inefficiency and financial controversy, the Chicago Teachers Union, called on the ultra-wealthy to pay their fair share in this post, but they forgot how to spell governor. Following California Governor Gavin Newsom's proposed billionaire tax, over $700 billion of wealth has gone out of the state in just 1 month. Scott Adams, the legendary creator of the comic strip Dilbert and a widely respected and beloved political commentator, died Tuesday at the age of 68. While speaking at an anti-ICE rally, socialist Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson seemed to be advocating for illegal immigrants to vote, saying, quote, "Whatever the status of your immigration paperwork, this is your city. You deserve to have a say in your government." Following President Trump's meetings with China and his push for a crackdown on fentanyl, new data shows that the U.S. overdose deaths have dropped significantly over the last year. And what they thought would be a gotcha moment, liberal TikTokers asked protesters at the Save Women's Sports rally if they could name professional female athletes. And this father's response was perfect.
Can you name 5 professional athletes in women's sports?
No.
So, and what are you here for?
I'm here to make sure my daughters don't have to play with men.
That's a wrap for this week. Make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us what you thought about these stories. And we'll see you back here next week on The Wrap Up. Thank you so much for watching this video. In order to keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation today.